Hi, I'm Madeline Webster and welcome to my explainer video, How is double counting CO2 affecting emissions from farming? There are a significant number of ways in which farming is affected by the accounting methodology of emissions and removals in the IPCC guidelines for national greenhouse gas inventories, which I cover in detail in my new book, Flawed Figures and Fragile Futures: Why Science and Not Politics Should Be Driving Climate Policy. I want to give a quick overview of just one of the rather more straightforward errors, the impact it has, what more impact it might have, and what we should be doing to change it. It's difficult to find an example of a mere two sentences which manage to be more fundamentally wrong than these two, which are provided in the 2019 refinement to the 2006 IPCC guidelines for national greenhouse gas inventories. But we're going to focus on just one aspect of it, and that is the portion of CO2 that is actually returned to the atmosphere over the lifetime of the cow, and the portion that is returned as methane. Very simply put, if a portion of the CO2, or rather the C that the cow ingests, is returned as CH4, then it cannot also, and at the same time, be returned as CO2. This is an either-or situation, and if some of it is returned as CH4, then the amount that is returned to the atmosphere as CO2 cannot be the same as what was removed. It must be less than. So when you put it in monetary terms, it becomes very clear-cut. If you take a portion of something and convert it to something else, you don't still have what you converted. You have what you converted it to instead. So as an example, if I have €100 and I convert €3 of that to dollars, I will have €97 and $3.24 at today's exchange rate. What I won't have is my €100 and the $3.24. Yet this is exactly what the IPCC guidelines are stating happens when the C is converted to CH4 by livestock. Now, people might well argue that we are talking about such tiny amounts that it is irrelevant, but those of us in the business world are aware that even tiny inaccuracies can cause huge issues at scale, and in farming our scale is global. So it is worth taking a look at the impact of this error in accounting for farmers globally, but first a caveat. There are two figures here that I am using for illustrative purposes. To the best of my knowledge, they are roughly accurate, but they must remain open to correction and more accurate calculation. However, I don't think it's any harm in using them to get a back-of-the-envelope figure for what the impact might be at scale. Those two figures are that it takes roughly 3% of the C that the cow ingests to convert to CH4 in the rumen, and that it takes 2.67 tons of C to produce 1 ton of CH4. If we were to judge this by what the IPCC have stated, then we would be saying that the cow ingests 89 tons of photosynthesized CO2 and returns 89 tons of CO2 plus a ton of methane for every ton of methane she emits. That cannot possibly be true. Now, as a generality and viewed as an entire carbon cycle, which the inventory system does not allow farming to do, it doesn't much matter because what is absorbed and what is returned to the atmosphere will always be the same ultimately. It might just have changed form. I don't dispute the warming impact of methane or the need to target it for reduction necessarily, but my dispute is that if you will take the methane out of the carbon cycle and count it separately as we are doing, you still need to account properly for the CO2 that isn't returned to the atmosphere as a result of the conversion to methane. Globally then, and using our same assumed figures for calculation, there are almost 200 million tons of CO2 being wrongly reported by the practice of zeroing out and therefore not reporting it at all as being returned to the atmosphere as CO2 when it is converted to methane instead. This could be very simply fixed by reporting the CO2 removals and emissions as a net emission figure, which in this case is a minus number, instead of not reporting it at all. Then subtract your number of CO2 emissions from the calculated CO2 equivalent figure for CH4 emissions. I get a lot of pushback on this suggestion from environmentalists and sometimes farm orgs too, and my question is this: why would we accept 195 million tons of CO2 being reported in all of the national inventories of the world as being reported to the atmosphere when that emission literally does not and cannot exist? What if the world were to adopt the Danish proposal to levy carbon taxes on agricultural emissions of €101 per tonne? The result would be that farmers would be paying almost 20 billion per year because of counting methane from cattle being returned to the atmosphere as both CO2 and CH4, and failing to account properly for the CO2 that converted to the CH4. That's a hell of an accounting error, and it needs to be borne in mind that we are only looking at a single issue here. This is far from being the only error, issue, or injustice contained within the inventory system for greenhouse gases, but it is one that deserves special highlighting because it is straightforwardly just plain wrong. I will happily accept corrections and adjustments to the calculations, but I won't accept that CO2 that converts to CH4 is also returned as CH2, and I won't accept it because it's not true. And I certainly won't accept every farmer in the world being charged taxes on emissions that don't exist, or indeed taxes being levied on consumers for emissions on food that don't exist either, should they decide to levy ag taxes that way instead. No one should have to reduce what they feed their family on the basis of tax being applied to emissions that don't exist. Nor are carbon taxes the only penalty that will be applied directly on farmers using the figures that result from the inventory guidelines. There are many incoming provisions that will cost farmers in a variety of ways that are based on figures that we know are wrong, and it cannot stand. Pressure must be brought to bear by farmers working together internationally to have this and other changes made. If you have any comments or questions, or if you have issues ordering the book from Amazon in Ireland, please do get in touch. I will help however I can. I will also happily organise meetings to run through the key concepts in the book for any farm organisation or group that would like to do that instead. We've had quite a few queries about which Amazon websites stock the ebook and the paperback. In the case of the ebook, that would be the US and the UK, which does include Irish customers, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, Japan, Brazil, Canada, Mexico, Australia, and India. The book is free for Kindle Unlimited readers in all of these regions. In terms of the paperback then, that would be the US, the UK, which sadly does not ship to Ireland. You'll need to visit one of the EU websites listed below or contact me directly. Germany, France, Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal, Sweden, and Canada. The key question then is, what can we do? To my mind, the very best way to get this error corrected is to spread awareness that it exists at all and the potential impact it might have going forward. It cannot be right, equitable, or fair to penalise people based on numbers we know are incorrect. So please share the video as widely as you can and contact your farm organisations, local agricultural scientists and local government representatives. The more people who are aware and are seeking the change, the more power we will have to bring that change about.